The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly and the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast. With approximately 2,000 bills introduced, if you are a member of the House of Delegates, you are very busy this week. That's why we appreciate our special guest this morning being here, Delegate Steve Landis. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Woody. Glad to be here.
Delegate Ben Cline, how are you?
Good, Woody. Thanks for having us.
Very busy, short 45-day session. Amongst those 2,000 bills, I'm sure are ones dealing with job creation and the economy, and I'm sure those issues are ones that are significant for your constituents as well as the entire Commonwealth.
Absolutely, Woody. The economy is foremost in the minds of my constituents. They want to know what we can do to help small businesses back home, create jobs, and get the economy moving again. So we've been working on bills to help to keep taxes low, keep regulations off of small businesses, and hopefully keep the economy moving in the right direction.
Great. And Delegate Landis, as Vice Chair of Education and as a budget conferee again this year, we know you're busy with those issues as well.
We are. I mean, obviously, you have to have a good public education system to recruit businesses, which is a key ingredient. But as Ben said, we are really focusing on jobs and economic development and trying to make sure that the existing businesses have what they need to be able to do business in Virginia, and also try to expand those businesses and recruit new ones. And I have to give Governor McDonnell, and he's been a great partner with the House of Delegates and the State Senate, and making jobs the #1 priority we've worked on the last few years.
What's going on with your cooperative extension programs in your district? Because I know that you have a lot of rural constituents.
We both have very rural districts, and agriculture is a prime driver of the economy in our area. So helping to introduce young people to agriculture and encourage them to get into agriculture as a career is important. That's why cooperative extension is so important. I was in it, Steve was in it, and we want to encourage it for the future. So putting resources in that area, hiring more extension agents in the field, that's something that we've both focused on, and Steve on appropriations has been leading the charge to get more money.
And of course, the 4-H program still plays a great role in educating youth in your district.
It does, and it helps in rural areas, obviously, to let young people know what agriculture is about and the opportunities there. But it also is helpful for the suburban and sometimes urban areas where kids don't have that exposure to a farm, are not on the farm on a regular basis, don't grow up with people that have farms and farming operations. So it also helps promote agriculture in the suburban and urban areas as well. And obviously the Extension Service helps farmers directly with many services, as Ben has said.
And Delegate Cline, you head up the Conservative Caucus in the House of Delegates. Tell us a little bit about the purpose of that caucus and some of its objectives.
Well, the caucus is a group of about 30 delegates and about a dozen senators, and we meet at 7:30 in the morning on Tuesday mornings and talk about the week ahead. We have an aggressive agenda that focuses on 3 different areas: jobs and the economy, how do we promote economic success from a conservative fiscal viewpoint. We also are promoting a conservative family-oriented agenda when it comes to faith and family. We feel that those are very important issues that need to be focused on. And then also personal liberty, keeping government out of the lives of its citizens and freeing them to pursue their interests. And those are the 3 areas that we focus on. We have about 100 bills on our agenda, and so we get together and talk about how those bills are progressing.
And how important is your position as a budget conferee to your constituents, Delegate Landis?
Well, Woody, it gives me an opportunity in representing the district I represent, and also the areas that Ben and I represent jointly, to have a seat at the table in the final budget negotiations. Obviously, there's 6 of us from the House side and 6 of us from the Senate that sit down and finalize and bring together the pieces of the budget that are different on each side. We have tough negotiations. We sometimes differ on the direction. We tend to be more conservative from a budgeting standpoint on the House side. The Senate has a different approach usually. But in the last couple of years, we've really tried to work ahead of time before we get to budget negotiations to really deal with some of the tough issues and get those off the table, or at least have a better understanding of where each side is coming from. But it gives me a seat at the table, and I'm very fortunate that Speaker Howe appointed me a couple years ago to that position. I'm grateful to be able to push the agenda from the standpoint of the House of Delegates and our budget priorities.
Great. Now let's turn specifically to some legislation that you're pursuing individually, and I know that the Board of Visitors issue has been in the news, but you have a bill dealing with the Board of Visitors writ large, if you will, throughout the Commonwealth.
Exactly. I think issues surrounding what happened at UVA brought to light the fact that the state statutes related to boards of visitors, governance and transparency were maybe not as clear as they could be or should be. So I actually have 2 bills. One deals with reforms for the boards of visitors and transparency and governance, and making sure that there's expectation also for board members to have training in what their responsibilities are, not only related to the Freedom of Information Act, but just what's good governance. Then also in the legislation we have a part where the executive committee of each board of visitors will be responsible for ongoing look, if you will, at the governance of the boards of visitors, and that the boards will at least annually meet with their presidents and review not only their compensation, but more importantly their expectations of what should be on that that president's agenda for the next year, and formalize that more so. We also have a piece of legislation that would put faculty, non-voting faculty member on the boards of visitors across the state for all institutions of higher learning in Virginia, and a student representative, and both of them would be selected by their respective governing bodies.
And Delegate Cline, texting while driving is back before the House of Delegates and the State Senate this year, and I know that you have a proposal dealing with that, among others.
Well, I'm pleased to be leading the charge to clarify the law when it comes to texting while driving, to make sure that when there are either accidents or other serious incidents involving texting, that it amounts to reckless driving, and that law enforcement can charge it as reckless driving. We had some court cases up in Northern Virginia where some judges were confused about the law because there's a separate statute dealing specifically with texting that makes it a secondary offense, which means you have to commit some other offense before you can be ticketed for texting. We have changed that to upgrade it to a primary offense so that you can now be ticketed for texting while driving, even if you don't do anything else wrong. The fines are increased, and we also amended our reckless driving statute to clarify that if you are guilty of reckless and you are texting, then there's a mandatory minimum fine of $500. So hopefully that'll send a message, particularly to our young people, that texting is not something that should be done behind the wheel. They should either pull over or wait until they get out of the car to do that.
And as a member of the Courts of Justice Committee, among other things, you are carrying a bill dealing with tort reform, that being a legal term meaning a personal injury or wrong, but that's important to our business community in other respects, is it not?
Exactly, Woody. We are ranked consistently as one of the best places to do business, and we have an outstanding court system and legal system when it comes to being business friendly, but a lot of times businesses have to divert resources to lawyers and making sure that they can defend and fend off frivolous lawsuits We try and minimize that in Virginia, but there are always improvements that can be made. So I have a bill in, it's part of a package that we're moving through on tort reform to help reduce those costs of frivolous lawsuits for businesses and help them invest more money in hiring people and expanding their businesses rather than in the courtroom.
I think part of your credo is that you believe we're over-litigated and over-regulated.
What do you always say? I'm on 4 committees. I'm on finance because we're overtaxed. I'm on commerce because we're over-regulated. I'm on courts because we're over-litigated. And I'm on militia police to protect our individual rights and liberties. So I like the committees I'm on. Helps me meet that credo.
Great, great. And Delegate Landis, I know that you are assisting the governor in carrying some of his educational reforms this session. Tell us a little bit about those.
The governor has a great package and really is emphasizing K through 12 this year. The legislation I'm carrying would set up a pilot program to target additional reading assistance for schools that are having problems, or the students are having difficulty meeting those reading achievement levels that we would like to see. Basically would allow the school systems to apply for a 2-year, it's a 2-year pilot that will allow them to apply for a waiver from the standards of learning testing requirements for science and history and social studies. And they would still have to do the subject matter work. The students would still have to get that information, but they just wouldn't have to take the SOL assessment. And would allow them to also put some additional resources with reading specialists and emphasis on reading. You know, Woody, obviously any student cannot do well if they don't read. And this is a targeted program for 38 school systems that are really having a tough time. And they're across the state, from the urban areas to some of the rural areas. And it was just a part 2, if you will, of something I worked on with the governor last year with the reading initiative to really target dollars in a program to help these students that are having a tough time. Again, if you can't read, you can't succeed.
So, yeah, I've heard it put another way. You learn to read, and then you read to learn.
That's a good way of putting it.
Tell us a little bit more about some of the other initiatives that the governor has before the General Assembly in terms of K through 12 education.
The governor is also setting up various things to help teachers and a Center for Excellence to really help provide teachers with some additional resources so that they can do a better job and keep up with the changes that are happening in education. You know, teaching is a tough position and a tough profession, but we need to provide some additional resources to really help those teachers keep up with what the changes may be. We also have, I think, one of the most important things is a piece of legislation Delegate Dickey Bell's carrying, that's a colleague of ours from the Valley, that really is looking at the teacher assessment of how well they're doing from their contract standpoint. It'll allow the teachers really to be held accountable, but at the same time allow the teachers some protections with the due process of appeals and the like when they're going through that process through a probationary period. It'll also give the teachers more of a level playing field with others, school employees, and how they're assessed and really looked at. But it's all tied to a 2% increase in teacher pay that would be the state share, and that was the sweetener, I think, has been described to bring the teaching organizations and the Virginia school boards and other organizations on board with this needed reform. And I think it really will make a difference going forward in public education.
No question but that teachers need a little bit more in terms of a pay increase. Many of them use their own funds to buy supplies in the classroom.
And sending more dollars to the classroom is something that we all can support, and nothing more central to the classroom than our teachers. So giving them a pay raise, which they haven't had in about 5 years, is something that I think we're all supportive of, and hopefully that will be part of the budget agreement that we can get accomplished this session.
And of course, teacher accountability in terms of how they do perform in the classroom is part and parcel of this package, and very important as well.
Absolutely.
Now, I think in your district you have 4 four-year colleges, do you not?
That's correct, I do. Washington and Lee, VMI, Southern Virginia University, which is relatively new in Buena Vista, and also Sweetbriar over in Amherst.
And they are very important institutions in terms of creating a workforce or for businesses to draw from to allow us to keep those businesses here, but also to attract new ones.
Higher ed is so critical to Virginia's economic success. Steve and I both have been very supportive of encouraging investment in higher ed. Last year we had a record level of investment in STEM research, which deals with science, engineering, math, and VMI is a leader in terms of engineering, and so encouraging that will help to keep the economy moving forward and keep a record of success in Virginia.
And of course, Delegate Landis, continued funding of our community college system is equally as important, if not more so.
They are. I mean, they not only provide a great educational opportunity for the students that want to go into higher education, four-year institutions, but they have great certification programs and great workforce training development programs for businesses, and trying to keep up with the local economy and really promote the workforce needs for now and in the future. And Blue Ridge Community College and Piedmont Virginia Community College are the ones that I have an opportunity to work with in the district that I represent, and they just do a great job. They're also lean and mean and very flexible in trying to address not only the higher education needs for those students that want to transfer to JMU or Tech or UVA or wherever it may be, but again those workforce needs that are there in the local community that businesses and industry need each and every day.
And of course, for those who want to transfer to the institutions of higher learning, there's still the 2+2 program, is there not?
There is, and we have the transfer agreements that work very well with our institutions of higher learning. In fact, that is where I know at Blue Ridge, most of the students that are going into JMU, or a lot of them, will go to Blue Ridge for 2 years and then transfer to JMU. And we're seeing similar things across the state. I know Piedmont Virginia Community College has a similar relationship with UVA, and I know Western Virginia Community College and Roanoke with Virginia Tech. So it works well, and it is a good transfer agreement program.
Go right ahead.
And I agree. My district is served by Dabney Lancaster Community College, Blue Ridge, and also Central Virginia over out of Lynchburg, and we worked hard to not only get funding for branch campuses in Buena Vista for Dabney and then in Amherst for Central Virginia, but I've also worked with Steve and others to set up some financial scholarships so that 2-year community college graduates can transfer to 4-year colleges more easily and make it more affordable for them to continue to pursue their education. So that's an achievement we can definitely be proud of.
Great. Now, what about creating more charter schools? As a matter of fact, I think there is a move afoot to give the authority to the State Board of Education as opposed to local school districts, because we only have 4 charter schools in the states now, and apparently there's a difficult time in the creation of charter schools.
I think charter schools across the country have proven that they can provide an alternative to the system and have records of success across the country. In Virginia, we are slow to embrace charter schools. We do only have a handful, and so the governor's proposed a means by which the state can encourage the creation of charter schools, and I think it's provides choice for families in areas where the schools aren't doing that well and need that alternative to get kids out of failing schools and into an environment where they can succeed.
And Delegate Landis, is that a proposal in the form of a resolution or constitutional amendment?
It's in 2 forms, Woody. There's a constitutional amendment because there are some constitutional questions in limiting having the state actually operate those. So I think you'll see the constitutional amendment. And then we also have legislation that actually set up and authorized the Board of Education to accomplish a charter school and set up a system if the public were to adopt the constitutional amendment.
And a couple of bills that are back before the General Assembly. One that's been around for quite a while would do away with the quote-unquote King's Dominion law. The other would allow those who are homeschooled to participate in athletics. I assume those bills are in the Education Committee. How are they faring?
Well, at this point, I think they're in a subcommittee and they're being considered. They passed last year, and they obviously passed out of the House, and we'll see what happens this year. But it is a concern that the state actually is responsible for deciding, how many school days we have and when, and if local school boards should be given the authority to start before Labor Day. There's a waiver process in place now that I think works pretty well.
And what about homeschool children and athletic participation?
Well, that is an important question. Homeschool children, in my view, should be given the opportunity to participate now in our school systems, in our public school systems. Those students who participate in sports generally need to meet certain academic requirements before they can participate in sports programs. So I think there's a conversation about making sure that homeschool kids still have to meet some kind of academic requirement to be able to participate in sports programs. But I think that that opportunity is something that we shouldn't keep kids out of. Sports are a fantastic way for kids to meet other kids, learn life lessons, and so we don't want to keep homeschool kids out of that opportunity.
Great. This is a very busy week for both of you because crossover comes next week, but Saturday is Groundhog Day, and people keep telling me that one of the issues that's been here as long as both of you have been here, transportation is again back on the table, and I know the governor has a very ambitious proposal. I just wanted to get your reaction to his proposal.
It is ambitious. Some would say it's a radical proposal. It would do away with the gas tax and replace it with an increase in the sales tax, and he would also implement several fee increases on registration and on electric cars, and he would also essentially lay the groundwork for the assessment of our current use tax on internet purchases. I've just simply laid out three priorities. One, it needs to be revenue neutral. Two, it needs to not increase fees unnecessarily on the people. And three, there needs to be a lockbox for any new revenue first so that we can keep that money for transportation.
Obviously, something needs to be done besides what has been done in the past. I guess a couple of years ago, the state was able to initiate through the bonding process about $4 billion, which has turned into new construction throughout the Commonwealth, but some people say that was just a Band-Aid. We can't continue to borrow. So what's your reaction to the governor's proposal to do away with the gas tax and substitute a sales tax for that?
Well, I agree with Ben from the standpoint of looking at it from a priority standpoint and kind of setting the bar, from the standpoint of how we look at it and what we do. But we know, Woody, the gas tax long term is just not sustainable and will not work for funding transportation. So we have to look at alternatives, and I think the governor at least just put an idea out there that we need to consider. At this point, I'm trying to keep an open mind and seeing what compromise we actually come up with.
Yeah, because as you say, there are a lot of moving parts. Some people suggest that placing faith or reliance in the federal government to pass a law that's been languishing there for a number of years in terms of internet sales, online taxes is Pollyannish, but certainly something has to be done. What kinds of needs are there in your district in terms of transportation? We always hear about Hampton Roads, we hear about Northern Virginia, but everyone has needs. Absolutely. In rural areas, transportation is important because we have more lane miles. And a lot of times we might not have the traffic, but weather and age take a toll on road systems in rural Virginia just as they do up in suburban Virginia. So maintenance is important. We still have a lot of unpaved roads that we're trying to get paved and provide better access for folks in our area. It helps the economy, and so from bridge replacement, such as the one in Fishersville near the hospital, to
I-81 expansion. We've got a lot of needs out there.
And of course, even though Virginia is at least number 2 or number 3 in terms of having a business-friendly environment, as I understand it, one of the reasons why we slipped was because of our transportation needs.
It was, Woody, and they made that very clear. So I think everybody in the General Assembly realizes it's a priority. It's something that we need to do now. I think part of the debate has been whether we use partly general fund dollars or, as the governor's proposed, the sales tax. Well, we've been using general fund, I always wonder about that argument because we've been using general fund dollars for transportation. And we've been using a portion of the sales tax since 1986, for that. But as Ben says, we've got to look at it from the standpoint of we're replacing the gas tax. Will it be really truly revenue neutral, but will it have an opportunity to grow as the economy grows so that it will deal with the maintenance issues and the ongoing transportation concerns? And that's what we're trying to really grapple with and figure out if it will accomplish that. And I think the parts dealing with the federal issue and the legislation they're looking at, as you said, it's kind of maybe a little bit overly optimistic to think that they'll pass that this year. So it should be interesting, but I think there is a realization we need to do something this year.
In a body where they can't even pass a budget for 5 years, you would for them to all of a sudden come on board and say we're going to start taxing internet sales is, as you say, a little far-fetched.
Right. About a minute left. I wanted both of you to have an opportunity to comment on another major issue, and that's the expansion of Medicaid. I'll start with you.
Well, as you know, the President's health care reform offered the states financial incentives to expand their Medicaid program to cover working adults who are financially disadvantaged. That promise, another promise from the federal government, is one that I'm wary of. So I'm not sure we should be expanding our Medicaid program at a time when we're strapped here at the state level and in the hopes of receiving some federal assistance at a later date. If the money comes in, we may be able to put some checks in place to secure that for the long term, but we need to move cautiously.
Landis.
Well, I share the same concerns that Ben has expressed. One, whether the federal funding will be there ongoing in the future. We don't want to provide services and then pull that out from under the folks that we're trying to serve. And secondarily, we've got to have reform in the system. We can't move forward one way or the other without reform.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to be here. We know how busy you are. Our guests have been Delegate Steve Landis and Delegate Ben Cline. Good to see you.
Thanks. Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.